Hey folks, we are going to Reddit Experienced Devs for a topic today. This one's how have you managed career-wise when switching to a different programming language? They go on to say I have 10 years of experience in back-end web development, but I'm getting tired of my programming language and would like to switch to a different one. It would open up the possibility of higher salaries, more interesting projects. So they're saying they don't have a problem with learning new things, but they're more concerned about like how they get a job. So I figured we'd talk about this because I have an opinion on this, I guess. And oh man, I need to get gas. Oh, I'm gonna be so behind today. I'm already late to leave for work by like 15 minutes. 15 minutes later than I want to be. Someone scheduled a meeting for me exactly at 10, which I didn't accept because I'm usually just getting in by 10. I have a meeting every morning at 8:30, so I've already started my workday, but now I have to get gas. I was like, maybe I'll be a little late. I will absolutely not make this meeting. So, friendly reminder for folks, I got myself off guard with the gas thing. If you want questions answered, leave them below in the comments. Otherwise, I go to Reddit. And if you have something that you want to be kept anonymous for, just feel free to write into dev leader on any social media channel. It's also my main YouTube channel. So happy to try my best to answer software engineering and career related questions as best as I can. Okay, so this topic around the language, I guess the focus for them is going to be about, I don't know if it's applying for jobs, if it's the actual ramp up period. So we'll talk about that. I'll only very briefly go over the learning part because, from their perspective, when they wrote the post, it seems like they don't have an issue with learning things or like how to approach it. So we don't need to spend much time on that. I'll only spend a little bit just in case for you as the listener, if you're kind of curious, like how does someone go about this? Because maybe it's top of mind for you and you're a little nervous about the switch or how to go about it. We'll talk. So let's kick things off with that because I don't need to spend too much time on it. The general situation, I would say, is that for most developers, we find, and obviously I'm generalizing here, which I don't love to do, but I think most developers probably find that they gravitate towards like a primary programming language, right? Now, some people may have like one or two, especially say if you're like a full stack web developer and you have something that you like using in the front end more and something in the back end more, let's say. I think that's probably a pretty common scenario. But most of the time I would say that people have like one language where they're like, hell yeah, like this is my jam. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't know any other language, and that doesn't mean that they can't use other languages very effectively. But I mean, probably most of us have like one language where we're like, you could tell me to build anything and I could go do it. For me, that's C#. But I self-admittedly have like an over-reliance on C#. And based on the work I do, it's panned out pretty well. I'm just not suggesting that's a great strategy for anyone to just like, hyper fixate on one language. So with that said, I think that if you're trying to explore other languages and stuff, you have to get outside of your comfort zone. Maybe that's obvious, but I think if you're trying to figure out like, how do I start? I would say minimizing the discomfort is probably a good way, in my opinion. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're trying to pick up another language, what I wouldn't recommend doing is switching all of the variables at once. So for example, I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. Say you're a mobile developer and you've been building Android applications in Java, and you're like, I want to go learn, I don't know, JavaScript now. Like, I wouldn't recommend go build a project and then, most mobile apps are dealing with SQLite databases. So now you're like, okay, like I have to go learn Postgres on top of that, or MySQL because people are using that. And like now I have to go learn about a cloud provider because it's a web app, and and basically just switching like literally every part. I just wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that if you're the kind of person who's I don't know, a little bit turned off by change, right? And odds are, if you're someone who's watching this and you're already like, oh man, like I wanted to pick up a different language, but I'm kind of nervous, you're probably in this camp. So again, not to say that you cannot have success with switching everything or whatever. It's more just that if you're trying to minimize the amount of friction and sort of change, that I would try to fix some variables in place. So, you know, if you were going to go, you want to use that same example, like I wouldn't worry about deploying your app right away into the cloud. Like, let's park that for a little bit, and who cares? Like, go use a SQLite database because you already know how to do that. You can find, you know, different database connectors for your web application, whatever language you're using. Let's say it's, I can't even remember if I suggested a language. Say you're going to learn JavaScript in the front end and the back end, and you could find a JavaScript database connector for SQLite. Like, JavaScript has libraries for everything. Is even, is odd, is one, is two, is three. So, you know, just try to fix some of those things in place so that it's not overwhelming and like a learning curve in every technology you're touching. That would be my recommendation. And one more thing that I'll just add on to that, and I've talked about this in lots of other videos, by the way, so if you want more on this kind of topic, just kind of poke through either videos on this channel or on my main YouTube channel. I have like live streams and stuff where I've talked about this kind of thing. Pick like if you're going to go build a project and you're like, I don't even know what to go build, just like start with a hobby of yours. Like, you like soccer, like make an app that, or a website or whatever you're trying to build that track or like is a player roster, or I don't know, make a little team manager UI or like anything, right? Sports stats, like anything you want that is related to a hobby of yours, and that will kind of help keep your interest a little bit better. Because if you're like, new language, new tech stack, everything, and now I have to go build a project that's not even of any interest to me, like probably your learning is going to feel like shit. So I'm at the gas station. Let's stop there. All right, just to finish off that thought, I was gonna turn off this stupid beeping, man. Going to say that one of the last things that I was dabbling in that was like a new tech was Blazor, and instead of trying to go, completely change every variable, I was migrating my blog from WordPress over to Blazor, and Stephen Giesel, who is a .NET developer, had built a Blazor blog engine. I actually really like his blog and his content. So I said, great. Like, I looked at some of the code for it. I said, I think this is going to be what I want to migrate to. And like, I'm not a Blazor developer. I know, so I'm going to talk about the variables that I'm fixing in place, right? But I'm not a Blazor developer. Front-end web development is kind of crappy for me. Like, I'm terrible at it. So I said, okay, it's my blog, so there's the interest alignment, right? That's going to keep me interested in making sure this is successful. It's C#, so I'm keeping a language consistent. I didn't want to think about all of the hosting stuff yet. I knew it was going to be hosted in Azure because I was sick and tired of using AWS, and I was having more success with Azure recently. Not just because I work at Microsoft, completely unrelated, totally honestly. And so for me, it was like the tech stack was the different thing. So the database, to start off, I just said, like, it's going to be in SQLite. I just want to run it locally on my computer without running a server for the database. Just do this. So I stood it up. I was playing around with it, had it working, and then I said I was going to migrate the stuff in. So then I migrated some data in, and I said, great, okay, it's still working. I was tuning some of the user interface a little bit just to style things differently, different menu options and stuff like that. So I got to play with Blazor, but all of the other variables were fixed in place. Then once I had something that I felt pretty good with, then I started saying, okay, like, how do I want to host the database? How do I want to do the deployments in Azure? So I got to go address those parts of the project completely separately and not just be like completely overwhelmed by it, because I might have been, right? I might have been like, I don't have time for learning all of this all at once, and the barrier to getting there might have been too great. Fortunately, I was also picking technologies I was at least familiar with, but just one quick example. So more time than I wanted to spend on that. Let's get back to the topic. So this person's saying, like, their kind of concern is like, do I need to start as like an entry level? But I think the reality is that, and this person's probably about to kind of live through this, is that for the most part, like, programming languages and tech stacks have a lot of extremely transferable skills. Okay, so the reality is right now, based on the landscape for jobs and stuff, like, because it's so competitive, if you had two candidates that were like basically identical, but the language that they knew, like in terms of the programming language, that was like the differentiator, and one person happened to know the language that's primarily being used in a role and the other person didn't, but everything else was the same, they're probably going to pick the person who has the experience in the language, right? It's one less thing that they have to go ramp someone else up on. But the reality is that especially if you're like a more experienced developer, there's so much that you learn in programming and software development that it's not like specific to the language or very specific to the tech stack. There's going to be patterns, there's going to be practices, there's going to be, maybe specific to the tech stack or the language. There's nuances that it's good that you know them and understand them and you can work with them. But like every language and every tech stack is going to have those. So it's going to be a constant thing in your career that you're always having to like pick up on different things and learn nuances of things. Like, that is a skill in and of itself. So my take on this is that probably the most impactful part in a career, or like, switching roles and for a different language or tech stack, is going to be the fact that the competition's so high right now. But I think that's it, personally. And I say this as someone who has hired software engineers in big tech, or joined a team and the people were hired right before me and people didn't know C#. Right? So literally at Microsoft, I've been at Microsoft for almost 5 years now, just under. Across 2 different teams, I've had people that were hired right before me, so I didn't do the hiring, or they were hired after I joined, so joined the team and then they were hired on after, and they didn't know C#. Like, I think there's only been like a couple of people that joined being like, yeah, like I code in C#, or like I would consider myself like fluent in it. And the rest were like, nope, don't know it. And it has not been an issue at all. Now, another thing, and I've talked about this in previous videos too, is that the idea here is that, and I need to be like maybe more explicit about it, is that a company like Microsoft has resources to be able to do that, to be able to say, hey, look, like we're going to hire you on, and yeah, we know that like you don't know this language, but that's okay. Like, it's a general purpose language, so it's like that shouldn't be an issue. And it's not like if you're not cranking out bug fixes and features by the end of the first day, like we're going to go bankrupt or something. So like, it's cool. Like, if you need a little bit of time to ramp up on it, we'll get you there, right? Bigger companies can have more resources for this type of thing. Startups, it's a little bit different, and people need to or need to understand when I'm saying this. It's not like I'm not saying in startups versus bigger companies. It's like, I don't know, like there's a difference in what people value in terms of people being able to learn and grow. It's just like in a startup, if you don't have financial resources because everyone is working their asses off and like people are, it's like week to week, you're like, we don't even know if our company's going to exist. Like, you probably realistically don't have a ton of time to ramp someone up in a new language. It's just the reality of it. So I'm trying to pick completely different ends of a spectrum here to illustrate that, like, my point around, hey, you don't know this language, it's okay, that might not be applicable at all in some circumstances. Some companies might be like, hell no, like you need to learn it, like, before you come here, because we can't afford the time to ramp you up. And if you don't like that, that's okay. Just don't apply there. That's fine, right? That's what I'm saying. It's not that I'm trying to claim there's no value in like ramping people up. I think there's tons of value in it. But I also understand that if a company like is so strapped for resources, because I don't know how many people have worked at startups. Like it's not, and especially if they're not like they don't have funding. It's not all sunshine, right? It's not like you don't get some sort of like quarterly learning budget and stuff. Like, these companies might not even exist from like week to week, so it's a little bit more challenging in these circumstances. So just consider that when you're applying to places. If you're getting frustrated because you're trying to do a career switch into a different type of role, and maybe the feedback you're getting is like, sorry, you don't know this language or this tech stack, and you're like, that Nick guy on YouTube said it didn't matter. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying from my perspective, like, being at Microsoft, it's never mattered. And even before that, to be totally honest, when I was working at a startup, once we reached a certain point, it didn't matter. In the beginning, and it's been a long time now, but in the beginning, because it's like almost, 13 years or so, I assume we were looking for .NET, we were building in C#. I'm pretty confident we were explicitly looking for C# developers, because we needed people to write in C# right away. Now, I don't know when that would have changed for us, because I can remember having conversations with like with people in HR, with like, you know, the recruiters and stuff, where it's like, well, what do we want to list as the requirements? Right? Like what are the technologies that people like should know? And I think like over time it's like, if they know an object-oriented language, then like that's fine, because they're gonna learn C# and it'll be okay. So that's one part of this. The other part that this person was asking about was like, does it put them, like, do they have to go back to like entry-level roles, right? Like, does it reset their career? And again, my high-level answer here is no. But if we go back to that, like, that point around how competitive it is right now, the answer might be maybe. Right? And sorry, I have like 5 work messages that have come in on this drive already, and it's like, it's obviously Monday. Yeah, the answer is like, unfortunately, maybe, but it's only because of how competitive things are right now. Now, to say, is that going to move me back in my career? Like, the answer, I don't think is yes. Like, I think it should be no, it's not. But if you're like, I'm hell-bent on trying to go into a different direction, it might feel like a temporary step back. But it's not like, as a software developer, you just got worse, or you suddenly had less experience overall, because there's so much transferable, right? I can't state this enough. There's so many transferable skills between programming languages and tech stacks that, like, it would be silly for me to sit here and say like, oh, like, no, like, you're only a junior level now. The reality is there's going to be a learning curve for you for any different language or tech stack, just like there would be for any human. It's normal. But we're talking about, like, you know, weeks to months, not years. And the learning curve is probably going to be, I don't know the exact shape, but the point is that it's not going to be like, what's a good way to say this? It will likely be very accelerated compared to someone who is actually junior. And the reason that's the case is because of all the other shit you already know. You're not learning how to use source control for the first time. You're not learning how to do a code review for the first time. You're not learning about how planning processes and stuff work, or how to collaborate on things for the first time. Right? You're learning a language. And if it's like a similar language, like I was using the example of object-oriented languages, if you're like, okay, like, I understand that we can have inheritance, or I understand that I'm creating like an object and that's going to allocate, you know, a bit of memory for this, and then I can assign methods and stuff on this thing, or it can have state, like, you're not learning about like fundamental concepts, you're just learning about how to represent them in the language. Or if it's a tech stack, you're learning about the paradigm that the tech stack uses. That might be different from other things you've seen, and maybe it's the first time you've used it, but the concepts you can probably relate to much easier than someone who is very, very new. So my point here is that it might feel like a very temporary step back if you're trying to switch companies to go learn, you know, get exposure to a different language or tech stack. But I think that's probably only if you're like not waiting out companies that will hire you on at the level you're at for not knowing the language. I'm sure there are plenty. It's just that it's going to be very competitive, right? Anytime I talk about the job market being competitive, I try to remind people, like, because I think some people get bothered by this kind of thing, and I'm like, we need to step away from what our opinions are, because people will say, well, it's not fair, and I'm like, I agree with you. I agree with you that if you have a lot of experience and you're not getting a job, that is unfair. I'm no disagreement from Nick at all. I hear you. But we can only focus on what we can control, right? So if there's someone else who has the same amount of experience as you, but it happens to be more focused in the language or tech stack that you're trying to move over to, odds are, on paper, they're going to look like a better candidate. It doesn't mean that they are. Right? I think we have to try understanding these things. It's like you have so many more applicants than what we used to have. So competition is up. Another thing is sometimes people don't realize how they're conveying themselves in resumes. So they'll say oh, well, I have all this experience, I am so good, and I've done all these things, and that might be true. And then you see their resume, and you're like, well, I can't get that from your resume. So all of a sudden, it's like you've not presented yourself well to someone who has to make a decision about going to the next step. So in this case, if we want to focus back on this question, it's I would look for ways to really try and stand out against other people that are going to have this, this programming language or tech stack under their belt. Right? So that means being able to, in my opinion, some ways that you could do that are showing that you are a very fast and effective learner, right? That you've been dropped into situations and we're able to overcome them. That could be really powerful. Just focusing on demonstrating impact could be really powerful, right? You might have, just to give you an example, you might have someone who has a resume and they're like, I've been a Java developer for 10 years. And you're like, okay, well, I haven't. That sucks, and I wanted to get into Java. Maybe you've been a programmer in general for 10 years, but not in Java. So all of a sudden, it looks like this Java developer's got you beat. I realize I'm greatly oversimplifying this. But it's okay, what if that Java developer, the only thing that stands out on their resume is that they've been a Java developer for 10 years. The impact and stuff that they've had is really hard to understand. But okay, they've been doing it for 10 years. It's gotta mean something. But you can come along and say, hey, look, I've also been a developer for 10 years. It was not in Java, it was C#, also a very comparable language. Maybe you don't want to have such a contrived example and you want to say I don't know, C++ or Python or something. Another language that has been heard of and people use. And it's not almost the exact same as Java. So you're I've been doing that for 10 years. Not Java though, but here's all the impact I was able to have at these different jobs, or here's a scenario where, I was put onto this project and ramped up on this technology very fast and was able to deliver awesome results. You could blow this other person out of the water and you're sort of minimizing the risk of, oh, this person doesn't know this language already. Let's speed up a little bit, buddy. So that's what I would recommend is and I recommend this for everyone who's trying to put together resumes and they're doing their job search and stuff, right? You got to think about, how do you stand out? How do you showcase you the best? But also try to think about other people that are applying to these jobs. How are you going to stand out against them? Which I think in this particular case is really a good focus to have, because that's who you're going to be competing against. In my opinion, the whole reason this person's asking this is because they're, I don't know what the right word is, nervous, fearful, concerned, that they're not going to stack up against, the other people that are applying for these roles, and that's why they have to go take a step back, right? So that is their concern. But I think if you can make yourself stand out, then at least from the getting the interview part, you can kind of get past that step. I think that's one of the hardest parts, is standing out. And it certainly doesn't get easier when you're, trying to say like, hey, I'm just learning this language now, or I want to be. I think obviously that makes it a greater challenge. But there are ways you can stand out. And I don't know if it's come across, but like, I wouldn't want that to be a reason that someone doesn't go apply. Like, I strongly encourage you, like, if you're like, hey, this is what I want to be doing, this is the direction I want to move in, like, I absolutely encourage you to go do that. For sure. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's probably going to be, realistically more challenging than a job switch into something that you're already very familiar with. But I think if that's the direction you want to go in, like, you should work at that. I just think it's a matter of like setting your expectations and then trying to, I don't know, to like get whatever feedback, right? Get your feedback loop going. If you're not getting any interviews, then like, how do we go change your resume so that you stand out more? Whether that's against your competition or highlighting the things that you've done amazing at. There's so many different vectors to go at here. But overall, as I get off the highway here, I think some things to consider are going to be you very likely will spend parts of your career learning new languages and tech stacks. So it's a skill to be able to ramp up in these different things. Given sufficient resources, a company shouldn't have to be overly concerned about, you not knowing a particular language or tech stack. Especially if you're more senior, you should be able to pick up on things pretty quick, right? And I would say, for more junior people, the reality is like if companies are hiring for a junior position, they should, I'm not saying they do, they should already have the expectation that they're going to be ramping you up anyway because you're junior. This does change if you have tighter resource restrictions as a company. And that was something I wanted to point out earlier, right? Just to make sure that people understand if they're getting frustrated and stuff. It's like, it might just be that a company they literally cannot accommodate that. As much, even if they really wanted to, they might not be able to realistically. There's a really cool colored red Mercedes behind me. It's too rainy to have the 360 on, but I would like to see it more up close. I can't tell what model it is. Looks nice. I don't think it's a GT, but the red is really nice. Oh, that's a very big tractor. Okay, yeah, if you thought that was helpful, if you want, I would appreciate if anyone's watching this, if they want to go check out Experienced Devs, go look for the thread. I can't even remember what the title is and I'm driving, so maybe when I park I'll pull it back up again. But if you want to share the link back to this video on that thread, I think that would be super cool. Kind of said on these videos, like, I'm not doing the self-promotion there because I've already been banned from a couple subreddits, even when people ask for videos and links. It's like, nope, you're self-promoting. And I'm like, this is literally what this thread was about. I don't know. I can't win, I guess. So I'm just trying to be more careful. But it's super helpful for me to get more exposure. There's people who've had, like, just to give you a quick example, there's people who have had their videos shared, and then like someone like the Primogen like does whatever, like, I don't know, a quick video on it, and they get more subscribers than 2 of my channels put together across 2 years. after hundreds of videos. And all they had to do was get a little bit of exposure in the right spot. So like when I say a little bit goes a long way, I truly mean it, right? Because it just takes like one thing like that to get some momentum. Because I've done across my 2 channels now, like over 500 videos. Like it's a lot. So yeah, the more exposure helps. But yeah, the Reddit thread, let me put it in park so I don't do anything too embarrassing. It's called, have you ever managed career-wise, or how have you managed career-wise when switching to a different programming language? This was 2 days ago on Experienced Devs. So by the time you see this, it might be 3 or 4 days ago now. But thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next time. Take care.